Shana Tova and Good Yontif. Before I begin, I want to share with you how it feels to be speaking from this Bimah to this congregation on Yom Kippur. The answer is incredibly scary. I can tell you that giving the traditional announcements at the end of services each Shabbat, as I have done for the past 18 months, is no preparation for giving this speech. If I make a mistake or forget to say something on Shabbat, I just correct it the following week. And to be honest, when I give my announcements at the end of services on Saturday morning, I am painfully aware of the fact that the congregation is only pretending to be listening to me, and that instead their mind is totally focused on the 7-layer cake which is sitting on the trays just outside the doors. Today, however, even though you may in fact be hungry, like I am, you are going to be here for a while, and since there's no 7-layer cake sitting outside, you might even be listening to me. I want to tell you about the many good things that have occurred here at Shaarey Zedek over the past year, all of which have generated a feeling of pride among the members, a pride which has been expressed in the slogan, "This is my shul." When I used this phrase in my speech last year, it was neither my intent nor my goal to create a slogan that could be used as a marketing campaign. I was just repeating a phrase that I had heard so many others say, a phrase which seemed to answer not only the question of why I agreed to be president, but why I was even here to begin with. But then something amazing and quite surprising happened. One by one, other members spoke to me or wrote to me saying that they too felt that Shaarey Zedek was their shul, and they told me about experiences and relationships in their lives that had connected them to this congregation. I was struck not only by the response, but the fact that each person told a different story, a story which was unique and intrinsically personal to that individual member. To illustrate its meaning, we decided to produce 8 full-page ads featuring members of our congregation from across the spectrum of individuals that comprise this wonderful congregation, including 1 Holocaust survivor, 2 Jews by choice, 1 young man working with innovative tech companies from all over the world, 1 person who left the private sector to found a company which delivers food to homeless people in downtown Detroit, a retired professor, a published author of fiction and nonfiction, a child psychologist, and finally, a 4-year-old who celebrates every Shabbat in this building with her friends, her parents, her grandparents, and her great-grandparents. All of these members are unique individuals, but all of them are connected by the bonds of this community. 4 of these ads have already appeared in the Jewish News. The remaining 4 will appear over the next 4 weeks. And they're all posted on the wall as you leave the sanctuary. Unlike all of our past marketing materials, which inevitably included a photo of this beautiful sanctuary, each ad included only a simple black and white photo of the member with the member's explanation of why Shaarey Zedek is their shul. So now we move on to the next step. Yes, this is our shul, but a few questions. First, how is the shul doing? Second, why is the shul so important? And finally, what can we do to ensure its future? In response to the first question, how is the shul doing, I can tell you that I feel good about the future of this shul. It is impossible to describe in this speech all the reasons why I feel this way, but you will agree with me if you are able to spend some time in this building. If you come on a Friday night when up to 200 people, mostly families with young children, are gathering for services and Shabbat dinner, or on a Saturday morning when attendance at services has almost doubled, on a Sunday morning when parents are bringing their children to religious school and staying for various adult education classes, on a Thursday night when up to 50 adults gather each week to study with our rabbis or other Jewish scholars, and on any day of the week when you can find various meetings, programs, and classes, including Jews from all of the city using the Beit Midrash or the beautiful classrooms and state-of-the-art technology of our Berman Center for Jewish Education. I'm especially pleased to tell you that in the past 18 months, 75 new families, many of them young, have joined this synagogue. Rabbi Shaarey has continued to demonstrate his amazing talents as a spiritual leader, and now that he has been joined by our newest clergy member, Rabbi Dahlin, we now have two of the most innovative and inspirational rabbis and two of the best teachers in the conservative movement. Two rabbis who are young enough to connect to young members, but wise enough to also connect to our older members like me. And while most Jews in America can only enjoy Chazan Propos on CDs or on YouTube, we are privileged enough to experience firsthand the full beauty of his cantorial skills. And finally, we are so fortunate to have Assistant Cantor Gutman leading and organizing all aspects of our religious services on a daily basis. I should mention that none of this could be possible without the dedication and hard work of my fellow officers, the Board of Trustees, the past presidents, our affiliates, the Sisterhood Men's Club and Empty Nesters, the staff, and many others. So there are many reasons to feel good about this shul. Do we have challenges? Yes, we do. Affiliation at synagogues across the country is down, especially at conservative synagogues. And younger Jews in particular have shown a reluctance to join long-standing institutions created by their parents and grandparents. And yes, a reduced membership results in reduced dues revenue, which is one of the reasons why we have an operating deficit. But the fact that there are challenges does not mean that the sky is falling. It is important to keep in mind the following points. First, we are still the largest conservative synagogue in the state with more than 1,000 families. Second, these problems are not new problems. One of the things that I have learned from spending time in our archives room, reading some of the minutes of board meetings over the past 100 years, yes, I actually enjoy doing this, is how the same problems recur from generation to generation. And it is amazing how some of the discussions held years ago at a board meeting could have been held today. To illustrate this point, listen to the following letter sent from an officer of this synagogue to the membership. And it begins, "Our children are drifting away. They are not attending services. Unless we can stem the tide, unless we bring about a service or build a synagogue center which will attract and hold their interest, we can hope for little for the future of Judaism in Detroit. We have already delayed too long. We must act and act immediately. Your board feels that definite steps must be taken at once toward the building of a synagogue center, and that the service must be more liberal, one which will appeal to the younger element. Unless action is taken now, we shall lose many members from not only our congregational ranks, but from conservative Judaism as well." In what year was this written? It wasn't last year. It wasn't 10 years ago. It wasn't 20 years ago. It was 94 years ago in 1922. The author was E.H. Salson, Secretary of the Congregation, a relative of people in this room. And he was arguing for the move to Chicago Boulevard, which eventually occurred 10 years later in 1932. You see, changes did not happen so fast even in those days. The third reason why we shouldn't panic, dues revenue has almost always fallen short of operating expenses, and has only been because of donations, gifts, and bequests given by members in addition to their dues that we were able to survive. Finally, even if there are problems and challenges, we have no choice but to solve them, just as our parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, and great-great-grandparents have done on so many occasions over the past 155 years. Our history is full of stories of how the members of this congregation have drawn together, made sacrifices, made contributions, did whatever was necessary to ensure the survival of this congregation. If you look around at this crowd, at this building, at this clergy, we are so far ahead of where this congregation has been on so many occasions in its history. Several times in our history, funds were desperately needed to purchase land or a building, to pay off a loan, to pay off a mortgage, or to pay off contractors who built our building. In contrast, we have a building in which we can do everything that we need and more. A building which we own free and clear with a new roof over 50% of the building, a new air conditioning system, a totally renovated school wing, which I hope you'll visit if you haven't seen it already. And thanks to the generosity of other members, we are currently renovating the clergy wing, the boardroom. We are creating a gallery outside of the boardroom to display photos and documents from our archives. And we are also constructing a pavilion in the courtyard to be used for outdoor Friday night services in the summer and other programs. Meanwhile, the building is not only functional, but as more and more young Jewish families move to Royal Oak, Ferndale, Huntington Woods, and even downtown, our location here in Southfield has become once again the geographic center of the Jewish community. And this building continues to be the preferred venue for any Jewish community event, as well as any large gathering of a Jewish organization, as no other building in the Jewish community can accommodate the size crowd that can comfortably sit in this room. Believe it or not, the Detroit Symphony Orchestra also considers this room one of its favorite places to play in Detroit outside of the Max. So after moving 6 times in the first 100 years, we are finally in a location which not only has served us well for 55 years, but seems to be well situated to serve us for another 50 years. And the next generation of this congregation will be the first generation in the history of this synagogue which does not have to raise funds to construct a building. So we are not in debt. We have a wonderful home, but we need to strengthen our foundation and plan for the future. And please let me remind you that this community needs both a strong federation with agencies that support Israel, our elderly, and those in need, and thriving synagogues and temples that teach our children the customs and rituals that define their Jewish identity. Federation protects and supports the Jews of our community, but Federation is run by individuals who acquired their Jewish identities, who learned how to be Jewish at a synagogue. And having served on many committees of the Federation over the years, I can tell you it is amazing how many of the leaders of our Federation came from Shaarey Zedek. You've probably heard the story of Shmulik on the beach with his bubby Bimah. I wish I could do a Yiddish accent. Bimah sits Shmulik down in a place that she thought was far enough away from the water. Shmulik, make something for Bubby in the sand. Shmulik begins to play, and Bimah sits down a few feet away. Moments later, out of nowhere, a huge tidal wave comes onto the beach, and right in front of Bimah swallows up Shmulik, and he is gone. Bimah is beside herself. Then she frantically cries out to the heavens, "God, how could you do this to me? One of your best and most loyal Jews. I keep kosher. I almost never engage in Lashon Hara. Please, oh please, save my Shmulik from the water." And then, just as suddenly as the first wave, another wave rises up, crashes onto the beach, and after the wave recedes, there is Shmulik looking up at Bimah, a little wet but smiling. Bimah lets out a cry of joy and bends down to give Shmulik a hug. But just as she is reaching out to hug him, suddenly Bimah stands up again and addresses the heavens. "God," Bimah says, "thank you for bringing me my Shmulik, but as I'm sure you know, he was wearing a hat." Now, like Bimah, this generation of members has been very fortunate and has been able to enjoy the fruits of the labor of those who preceded us. Many wonderful things have been delivered to our feet. But unlike Bimah, we cannot just sit back and rely on other people or other forces to bring us Shmulik's hat. Even though this congregation has been there for all of us, the survival of this congregation can only be guaranteed by the efforts of the people in this room. This wonderful building exists because 60 years ago, the members did what was necessary to make it happen. The beautiful Clover Hill Cemetery exists because 99 years ago, members of Zedek had the foresight and the will to create it. And similarly, we must fulfill our responsibility to endow the future of the synagogue for the next generation. I'm therefore pleased to announce that to achieve this goal, the leadership of the synagogue has embarked on a campaign to raise money to finish the modernization of our building and increase our endowment. This campaign is just beginning, but it has been jump-started by a few major gifts from a small group of members. You will be hearing more about this in the near future. We hope that each of you will do your best to help us. I want to leave you with the words of an email I received from a member after Yom Kippur last year, which eloquently describes the important role that the synagogue can play in a member's life. And the email read, "I just would like to say that this is my shul too. I started at Zedek when I was 8 years old at the Chicago Boulevard building. There was no bat mitzvah, so when the girls were 16, they were confirmed, which meant we sang some songs in the sanctuary. When most of the girls finished at this time, I stayed on until the 12th grade because I couldn't get enough. When I married, I had to move to New York for 6 years. Once when I came home to visit my parents, to show off my beautiful son, I found my father waiting for an ambulance to take him to the hospital. He was dying. I had no one to talk to, so I called Rabbi Adler. I happened to be leaving the hospital one day, and there he was. He spread his arms and embraced me. I am still crying out of love and appreciation. The year I came back from New York was when Rabbi Adler was killed. I went to the funeral even though I had to stand on Bell Road. When I had my own children, I sent them to Shaarey Hebrew School. My daughter went on a Ramah trip to Israel. When she was in her junior year at University of Michigan, she told me she wanted to spend a year at Hebrew University in Jerusalem. Of course I wanted her to go, but money was an issue. I talked to Rabbi Groner, and he found a couple to sponsor her trip. I still have a picture of them with her. Now I sit in my shul with my children and grandchildren at high holiday services. I would like to end by wishing you, the fellow members of my shul, a happy and healthy new year. Shanat Tova.